The day, my friends. Today is the day that I'm going to tell you about Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, because if you've been with me, you know I have been reading this for probably like the last year. Just kidding, it's been a month. This book, 5 out of 5 stars, just for the fact that Charles Dickens released this a chapter at a time every month and had things that were like on page 700 that correlated with things on page 50. I feel like that makes you a brilliant literary genius. I think J.K. Rowling kind of did the same thing, where she had an outline and a map of all of her books or all the stories she wanted to tell, and then essentially she took that outline and just filled it in. That is exactly what Charles Dickens did, and he did it brilliantly. When you're holding this book, you're practically holding Charles Dickens' brain. It's like a zombie love thing. This is Charles's brain. Background on David Copperfield: Charles Dickens sat down to write his autobiography, and when he found he couldn't, because he had this traumatic event in his childhood of his dad going to debtor's prison and then him having to go and work in a shoe blackening factory, which essentially is shoe polish. He made shoe polish. It just traumatized him so bad, and so he decided that he would fictionalize his autobiography, and then he could find ways to make this character deal with his coping. So hence David Copperfield was born. David Copperfield is an older narrator. He too is writing his autobiography of how he had this horrible childhood, but interestingly enough, he too starts to fictionalize his autobiography. Kind of like Inception, where you have a Charles and a David and a David, and each one trips back to themselves. You've seen that movie, you get what I'm talking about. Each one is trying to figure out what the heck is going on in their lives. Bless their hearts. So young David Copperfield loses his fortune and has to go work in a wine labeling factory. Creepily enough, when this outline came out from Charles Dickens, the only thing written on the outline is "what I know so well." So we can kind of see that this truly traumatized old Charles Dickens, this feeling of survival and not knowing if you're going to make it through the day, being in a rat-infested factory. It really took its toll. Young David has the question of what it means to be a gentleman. To be a gentleman, you have to have money, but you also have to have morals. And it's a weird line that he's trying to tread here, because he's essentially lost his money and now he is on this road to recovery, and he's trying to figure out his moral tree as well. So it goes back to the question, how do you become the hero of your own story? Well, Charles Dickens made an avatar of himself into David Copperfield. Why not let David Copperfield make avatars of himself? So David Copperfield essentially splits off all of these personality traits that he's trying to deal with into the characters of the novel that he is writing and fictionalizing. Is your mind blown? Did I just take you down the rabbit hole? You have characters of spousal abuse, which it is recorded that Charles Dickens did not have a happy marriage. In the marriage in the book, the wife starts to develop a cough. Charles Dickens couldn't kill his real wife, but he could sure as heck try to kill off his fictionalized wife, right? That is a way of splitting that part of himself off from him. There's the evil and greasy and slimy Uriah Heep, who practically oozes from the page. Interestingly enough, if you read this book and you follow Uriah's story, Uriah is doing exactly the same things as David is doing, but since David is doing it just a little bit better than Uriah, Uriah becomes the skis-ball of the story. Eventually, everyone starts to kind of develop a cough. He either kills them, or he sends them away, or some of the girls end up ruined in prostitution. Essentially, he takes all of his characters and makes them so dramatized and out there that is how he looks good and how he becomes the hero of his own story. This question of, is there really a true gentleman out there that won't hurt you, that can have morals, that can have money? The only way you can do this is to become David Copperfield and split all the good and bad parts off of you and become just kind of the stagnant character, which David Copperfield really does become. He's just kind of the fly on the wall the whole book, and you're trying to figure out why he's letting it all happen around him. It gets pretty intense. So we finally come to the character of Mr. Dick. Mr. Dick, ironically, is also writing an autobiography, and he can't do it because King Charles I is constantly in his head. He starts writing about King Charles and he can't write about his autobiography. King Charles, Charles Dickens, there's always something in this writer's head that is a block. And I think that that's what Charles Dickens was trying to portray to us, is that There are moments of trauma and insanity in our lives that will give us a block, and we have to find ways of coping with it. For Charles Dickens, it was through writing and fictionalizing things, and I would also say reading, because he really, really includes a lot of fictional texts for that time period in his novel. I just find that truly fascinating, that to deal with something, you can either fictionalize it or you can read and you can try to cope with it and project it out from you to deal with it. Like I said, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. Truly, truly fascinating. Seriously, if you read this book, it is hilarious. If you don't find the humor in it, then you are reading it wrong. I don't give books 5 out of 5 stars usually, but this one is just literature brilliance. It sparkles, it's delicious, and I would highly, highly recommend that you pick it up. So I'm gonna put my book boyfriend away. I've taken the midterm, I've written the paper, and I had a fantastic ride. If you're looking to delve a little into the deeper classics or the harder, not harder necessarily, but a little more literary rich classics, baby, this is your book. This is your book to pick up. Hit subscribe below. I will talk to you all really soon. Find yourself a good book to read. It's how I cope too. Oh my gosh, I think Charles Dickens is in my head. And the top just keeps on spinning. Bye.